In 2021, a newlywed couple vanished from a quiet Texas road just hours after their wedding. No screams, no bodies, no clues, only an abandoned shoe in a muddy ditch near Red Lantern Lake, and an emptiness so deep it echoed. Before we continue the story, comment what city you're watching us from. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications if you enjoy stories like this. Exactly 1 year later, the groom's best friend received an envelope marked from Willow Pines, Oregon. Inside was a Polaroid of a wedding ring buried in fresh earth and a note that simply read, "You should have stopped him." What investigators found in a hidden cabin beneath a trapdoor opened a wound deeper than anyone imagined, exposing 12 years of silence, 18 missing brides, and a hunter still hiding in plain sight. This isn't just another disappearance. It's justice coming to collect. This is the story of the couple who vanished after their wedding. June 19, 2021. Austin, Texas. Hannah laughed as the gravel crackled beneath their truck's tires, bare feet resting on the dashboard, fingers gently tangled in her husband Ethan's hand. The darkness around them was quiet, the field stretching endlessly, the landscape stark and empty, like the world had narrowed down to this moment. The pickup slowed, headlights illuminating the faint outline of the countryside cabin Ethan had kept as a honeymoon surprise. Rustic, private, perfect for two people looking to vanish for a while. Hannah squinted into the night, her laughter fading into curiosity. "Is this it?" Ethan cut the engine, grinning softly, his voice a gentle tease. "It's private, no one to bother us. No cell service either, just you and me." They unpacked casually, pulling bags and champagne bottles into the cabin. But as soon as they stepped inside, Hannah's smile faded. Everything was too orderly, too quiet. The wooden floors polished to a mirror shine, bed sheets crisp and untouched, counters gleaming unnaturally beneath harsh lights. Hannah's nose crinkled instinctively, "Smells like bleach." Ethan smiled reassuringly, kissing her forehead. "We'll make it ours." That night, Hannah played their wedding song from her phone. One faint bar of signal, just enough. They danced barefoot, hearts beating in rhythm, warmth radiating from the fireplace. The rest of the world melted away, until a sudden, sharp noise broke the spell. 3 measured knocks at the front door. Hannah's heart stopped mid-beat. Ethan moved cautiously, slowly opening the door. No one. Only the darkness and silence staring back at them. They locked the door, brushed off the nerves, and went to bed, pulling each other close. But by morning, the cabin door stood open, swinging quietly in the Texas breeze. The pickup truck was gone. Hannah and Ethan had vanished without a trace. And the scent of bleach lingered stronger than ever, mixed now with something else. Something raw, something metallic, something unmistakably wrong. What's your theory? Did Hannah and Ethan run, or was their first night their last? Comment your thoughts and subscribe, because what's beneath that cabin isn't just evidence, it's the truth, waiting to speak. June 2022. A year had passed, the Texas heat returning to scorch Austin as though nothing had changed. But for Mark Talbot, best friend to Ethan Grayson since childhood, everything had changed. He stood motionless in the entryway of his small bungalow, fingers clutching the envelope he'd just retrieved from his mailbox. It had no return address. Just a faded postal mark, Willow Pines, Oregon. His breath stalled as he tore open the envelope, his heart hammering like a trapped animal. From inside, a single Polaroid slid into his palm. A delicate wedding ring glinting dully, half buried in the dirt, shimmering hauntingly in the camera's flash. Beside it, hastily scrawled in angry red ink. You should have stopped him. A wave of nausea surged through Mark as the room seemed to tip beneath him. He knew this ring. He had seen Ethan slip it lovingly onto Hannah's finger, watched them laugh and kiss under strings of white lights only 1 year ago. A perfect moment, now twisted into a ghostly mockery. The ring stared back at him accusingly. The words stabbed deep, festering within his conscience like poison. Mark had tried to move forward, tried to silence the whispers in his mind that said something was off about Ethan before the wedding. But he'd shrugged them away, attributed them to nerves, paranoia, anything but reality. Ethan was his friend, his brother. They'd grown up together, played football on those endless Texas afternoons, snuck beers behind his dad's garage. He had trusted him implicitly. But trust had its consequences. Driven by guilt that had carved an endless hollow in his chest, Mark scoured property records deep into sleepless nights. His discovery chilled him to the bone. Ethan had inherited a cabin 4 years earlier, nestled in the isolated pines of Willow Pines, Oregon. A hidden place, untouched by daylight, untouched by questions, kept secret from everyone. Even Hannah. In that moment, clarity came, harsh and undeniable. Mark understood that silence was no longer an option. But he also knew the official channels, the bureaucracy, the skeptical cops who wrote off Hannah and Ethan's disappearance as a runaway couple, wouldn't move fast enough. It had to be him. He had to find the truth with his own hands, no matter how much they trembled. Within days, Mark left his life behind, boarded a plane, and drove the final miles toward Willow Pines. His rental car rattled down gravel roads, each mile tugging him deeper into memories he couldn't suppress, pushing him closer to answers he wasn't sure he could face. The dense Oregon woods closed around him, shadows reaching out like fingers. Isolation pressed heavy, whispering cold doubts against the window glass. And there it was. The cabin loomed suddenly through the trees, silent, stark, and waiting. It was small, deceptively simple, picturesque enough to lull any visitor into false security. Yet every nerve in his body screamed danger. He parked, stepping into air heavy with moisture and the scent of decay masked by something sharper, chemical, unnatural. Bleach. The scent hit like a slap, stronger as he moved inside. The interior was pristine, untouched as though frozen in time. The floors polished, furniture aligned precisely, magazines fanned across tables as though arranged by unseen hands, every angle neat and perfect. Too perfect. Mark moved slowly, each step a negotiation with his courage, eyes scanning for anything out of place. Nothing. Until he reached the bedroom. His pulse quickened. A faint smudge on the wall, barely noticeable. He reached out, fingers trembling, and touched it softly. It flaked beneath his touch, rust-colored and brittle. Blood. Old blood. His stomach twisted violently, and he stumbled backward, nearly falling. Behind him, a floorboard creaked. Mark spun, breath trapped painfully in his chest. Standing at the threshold of the front door was a tall, wiry man, sun-weathered face partially shadowed beneath a ragged ball cap, eyes deceptively calm yet sharp as a razor. "You lost, friend," the man drawled, his voice carrying an unsettling ease. "Didn't expect nobody today." Mark straightened, forcing composure. I rented the place," he lied smoothly, his heart thrashing wildly against his ribs. The man's eyes narrowed slightly. "Funny, ain't seen no reservation. I own this land. Name's Will Donovan. Live just up the ridge." Mark felt the threat coil beneath Donovan's courteous tone. "Got in early," he replied quickly, summoning his most confident smile. Donovan stared a long, hard second, then nodded slowly. "Well, holler if you need something. Cell phones ain't reliable out here. Enjoy your stay." He vanished back into the shadows, leaving Mark's heart pounding furiously, his instincts screaming one truth: the predator was still hunting, and Mark had stepped directly into his territory. Returning inside, Mark locked every door, every window. Fear coiled tight around his chest, but determination flared brighter, stronger, fierce. He couldn't undo what had been lost, couldn't erase his role in the silence that allowed this tragedy. But he could choose what came next. He could stand, fight, and refuse to let this darkness devour anyone else. That night, as the wind moaned through the trees, he sat by the fire, whispering softly to a small picture of Ethan and Hannah, smiling from a happier time. "I'll find you," he promised. "And I'll make this right." Mark knew that sometimes redemption meant stepping into shadows willingly, facing truths no one else dared confront. It meant confronting the monsters who wore familiar faces. It meant becoming something stronger, something unstoppable. Something that didn't break, even under the weight of crushing grief and terrifying uncertainty. He knew that if he could save even one life by uncovering this truth, his past mistakes wouldn't have been in vain. His silence wouldn't be his legacy. His legacy would be strength, determination, and justice. It would be courage born from tragedy, proof that even from the darkest circumstances, hope and bravery could emerge, fierce and undeniable. And as Mark sat there, the cabin silent around him, the crackle of the fire his only companion, a fierce clarity filled his heart. He would face this storm. Not because it was easy, but precisely because it was hard. Because courage meant action in the face of impossible odds. Because Hannah, Ethan, and every lost soul before them deserved someone brave enough to fight back. That was why this story mattered. Not just because of tragedy or fear, but because of strength born from pain. It mattered because Mark wasn't just hunting for answers, he was hunting for redemption, for justice, for a chance to set things right. Would you investigate that cabin yourself if you were Mark, or trust the FBI to handle it? Comment below right now. Don't forget to subscribe and keep watching, because what Mark finds inside this cabin will rewrite everything you thought you knew. Months before the wedding, tucked between scented pages of a rose-gold journal, Hannah wrote the kind of entries that were never meant to be read by anyone else. Her handwriting was soft and looped, full of love, but something else lingered there too. Doubt. Her early entries were romantic. She called Ethan her lighthouse, her safe place, her answer. But as the wedding date neared, those letters began to shift in tone. A slow unraveling. Ethan had changed. He'd started waking up in cold sweats, staring out the window for hours. He wouldn't talk. Wouldn't explain the strange calls he stepped outside to take. Hannah tried to chalk it up to nerves. All couples go through stress before the big day, right? But Ethan's obsession with control became unsettling. He started checking her texts, deleting names he didn't recognize. He insisted on planning the entire honeymoon alone, said he wanted it to be pure. Said the destination was somewhere sacred, a place only the two of them would ever know. There were things she didn't tell anyone. Not even her best friend, not her mother. She was scared she'd ruin the wedding if she spoke too soon. Or worse, scare herself out of the fantasy she had always wanted. But one entry, dated just 2 weeks before their vows, cut deeper than the rest. It read, "Ethan looked at me today like I was a stranger. Not angry, not sad, just hollow. He said he'd been dreaming of wiping the past clean. That we needed to start fresh, somewhere far away, where no one could ever find us. He laughed after saying it. But something in his eyes didn't laugh with him. Hannah never knew Ethan had cut off his mother 2 months prior. Never knew he'd transferred nearly $140,000 into a private offshore account under a different name. She never saw the new life insurance policy, or that he had quietly changed the beneficiary. And most importantly, she had no idea Ethan owned a cabin in Oregon. No idea it had a basement. But the one person who did notice the cracks, the one person who saw Ethan's eyes grow darker each time they spoke, was Mark Talbot. Mark wasn't just Ethan's best man. He was the one who'd known Ethan since they were kids playing with rusted footballs in the Texas dirt. He remembered the time Ethan's dad disappeared for 3 days, then came back like nothing happened. Mark remembered when Ethan found that box in the attic, full of maps, journals, and things no 12-year-old should ever see. When Mark asked Ethan about it back then, he just smiled and said, "Some things don't stay buried." At the time, it felt like a childish joke. Now, that memory felt like a warning he never understood. After Hannah vanished, Mark replayed everything. Every moment. Every joke. Every side glance Ethan gave him at the bachelor party. The half-truths. The private messages. The unease that curled in his gut and was silenced with cheap champagne and toasts about forever. He'd ignored his instincts. And now he was paying for it in guilt. Mark spent days poring through Ethan's belongings, trying to build a profile from scattered pieces. He found Hannah's journal, tucked beneath a stack of wedding mementos she never got to share. The final entry wasn't written in ink. It was a sticky note, half torn and smeared, stuck on the back cover. "If anything happens to me, find the cabin. Ethan knows why." That line became Mark's compass. The drive into Willow Pines was like crawling into another world. Dirt roads. Endless trees. Fog so thick it swallowed the car headlights whole. He hadn't eaten in over 12 hours. Didn't care. The only thing that mattered now was this cabin. This place Ethan had buried in silence. And when Mark stood before it, wood grayed with age, windows shuttered, porch sagging slightly from years of neglect. He understood why no one had found it sooner. It looked like a leftover ghost from another decade. But something about it felt staged. Like it was meant to look forgotten. He entered with the key found inside Ethan's glove compartment. The moment the door creaked open, the smell hit, not musty like most cabins. It was sharp. Artificial. Bleach and pine cleaner. A cover-up. Mark stepped inside, eyes adjusting to the gloom. Everything was meticulous. Too meticulous. Old magazines fanned neatly on the coffee table. A couch covered in plastic. Kitchen shelves arranged by label type. It wasn't lived in. It was displayed. Like a showroom for something that should never have existed. He searched room by room, documenting everything. Then, in a bedroom drawer, he found it, a leather-bound notebook. At first glance, it looked like a ledger. But inside, Ethan's handwriting filled every line. Each page held a name. A date. A location. And a note. July 14, 2015, ML. /harvested/silence held. December 22, 2017, J&K/shared breath. Cleansing complete. Mark's hand shook as he read. Dozens of entries. Maybe more. Couples. Always couples. And always the same pattern. Taken. Recorded. Cleansed. He flipped faster. Then stopped cold. June 19, 2021, HG/Grayson Lodge/Final Cleansing. She saw me. She remembered. His stomach dropped. Grayson Lodge. Ethan had named the cabin after himself. The arrogance. The cruelty. Hannah had remembered something. Recognized something in him at the last second. And it had cost her everything. This wasn't a disappearance. This was ritual. This was obsession. This was a history of horror hidden in plain sight. Mark sank to the cabin floor, eyes burning, body numb. He should have said something. Should have pushed harder when Hannah confided in him. Should have never let Ethan walk down that aisle. Now, there was only one thing left to do. Expose it. All of it. No matter what it cost. Have you ever seen red flags too late? Comment yes or no if you've ever ignored your gut feeling, and smash the like button if you're starting to realize this was never a disappearance, this was a blueprint. The FBI moved swiftly, drawn by Mark's frantic calls and the sinister quiet that surrounded Willow Pines. The cabin stood in deceptive silence as agents descended, their vehicles weaving through trees like ghosts emerging from shadow. At first glance, the property appeared untouched, forgotten, a relic of simpler times. But as agents stepped through the doorframe, the illusion shattered instantly. Every surface gleamed as if freshly polished. Shelves stocked neatly with canned goods, untouched plates stacked in military precision. Even the refrigerator hummed quietly, fully loaded with enough supplies to last weeks. The scent hung sharp and artificial in the air, bleach and lemon cleaner masking something darker beneath. Agent Lucas Tanner stopped abruptly, scuffing the floorboard beneath his boot, a muffled creak betraying a hidden truth. Carefully, he lifted an old, moth-eaten rug, and his breath stalled. Beneath lay a trapdoor, heavy, locked with rusted bolts. It was as if the very wood itself held a secret it desperately wished to conceal. Tanner knelt, breath held tight in his chest, and began loosening bolts with deliberate care. His colleague stood behind him in tense silence, waiting for the moment of revelation. Finally, with a heavy metallic groan, the trapdoor opened, releasing an oppressive gust of stale, bitter air, laced with the unmistakable odor of neglect and decay. Below stretched darkness, a rusted metal ladder descending into obscurity. Tanner grabbed a flashlight, its narrow beam slicing down into the gloom. Carefully, he began to climb down, each rung squealing protests beneath his weight. The basement space below was cramped, dirt-floored, and lined by weathered wooden beams. He bent low, sweeping the flashlight beam across shadows dancing in silence. His heart stopped. There, against one rough-hewn wall, lay two sleeping bags, neatly rolled as if waiting patiently. Beside them, a small gasoline-powered generator sat silent and cold, connected to a stack of monitors mounted on a makeshift shelf. Tanner's eyes traced the cables back toward the far corner, each wire disappearing upward, hinting at hidden cameras somewhere inside the cabin. Someone had been watching. Closely. But it was what lay beneath those monitors that froze him completely. On the dirt floor, resting like an accusation, was a single Polaroid photograph, edges curled slightly with dampness. He lifted it slowly, feeling his pulse quicken. Hannah's terrified face stared back at him, eyes wide and pleading, holding up a local newspaper dated just 3 weeks earlier. The headline read, "Search continues for missing Austin woman." Tanner's hand trembled, realization dawning like ice down his spine. Hannah had been here recently, alive, forced to pose for proof of life. Ethan's fingerprints were all over this place, even if invisible. This basement wasn't just storage, it was proof of something far worse. This was captivity. This was preparation. This was the heart of Ethan's twisted plan. Agents combed every inch, meticulously cataloging each chilling detail. But upstairs, Mark paced the cabin floor anxiously, haunted by memories that refused to quiet. It was then he noticed something peculiar. Another rug, centered almost too perfectly in the main living area, caught his eye. His heart thrummed painfully as instinct drove him forward. He yanked the rug aside, revealing a second, smaller trapdoor, concealed expertly within the wooden floor. Without hesitation, Mark pried it open, his fingers tearing against rusted hinges, with splinters biting into his palms. This wasn't about caution anymore. It was about answers. He aimed his flashlight into the newly discovered void, illuminating the dirt floor barely 3 feet below. Taking a shaky breath, Mark lowered himself down. The smell was thick, wet, heavy with mold, decay, and something metallic. As his eyes adjusted, the flashlight beam trembled across objects half hidden beneath the soil. Clothing, partially rotted and torn, a woman's shoe abandoned and caked with mud, and then, a thin chain glittering faintly. He knelt slowly, gently extracting the item, holding it into the dim beam. A delicate gold necklace bearing an unmistakable locket, a gift he'd watched Ethan place tenderly around Hannah's neck the night of their engagement. Mark's heart splintered, grief ripping through his chest. Hannah had worn this with joy, with hope. Now it lay discarded like garbage, another trophy in Ethan's horrific collection. And beside it, something else. Mark's fingers brushed across the soil, uncovering a small black leather-bound journal, nearly identical to the one upstairs. He opened it carefully, breath hitching sharply as names spilled across pages, meticulous handwriting noting dates and fates. The last entry was recent, ink still stark against paper. Hannah Grayson, final cleansing complete. He recoiled in revulsion, the truth clear and devastating. Ethan had documented his darkness, written it down proudly, like achievements to be preserved. Each victim was an object, a trophy. And now Hannah's name joined the list in cold, clinical finality. Above him, the cabin creaked softly, settling into deeper silence. The sense of isolation became suffocatingly clear. This place wasn't a refuge, it was a hunting ground. Ethan wasn't just misguided or confused, he was methodical, obsessive. He had meticulously built this trap, using love as bait, hope as a lure. But now Mark understood something deeper, something powerful. Evil thrived only when good men remained silent. And he wouldn't stay silent. Not anymore. Mark climbed back into the cabin, body trembling but spirit hardened like iron. He pulled out his phone, dialed the FBI agent upstairs, voice thick with determination. I found more. He was collecting them. All these people. We need a full forensic team. This isn't just Hannah and Ethan. There are others. Agent Tanner exhaled, words grim but resolute. We've got enough to open a national investigation. Stay put. Mark nodded, hanging up, eyes lingering on the bleak cabin around him, the emptiness heavy, haunting. He couldn't bring Hannah back, couldn't rewrite the tragedy, but he could shine a blinding light on this darkness, ensuring Ethan never hurt another soul again. He stood alone, absorbing the pain and horror he'd uncovered, understanding clearly the mission ahead, to speak for the lost, the silenced, those erased beneath layers of lies and secrets. This wasn't just about capturing a killer. It was about honoring every victim, reclaiming their stories, restoring dignity stolen from them. Outside, dusk settled softly over the Oregon forest. But Mark knew the darkness wouldn't linger forever. Even night gave way to dawn. And he vowed, standing firm against the weight of evil, that he'd carry their memories into that new day. Because true courage isn't the absence of fear, it's facing darkness head-on, stepping forward when every instinct begs retreat. It's holding hope, even when surrounded by loss. Mark knew that now. And he refused to step back. Not when justice depended on it. Would you be brave enough to open that trapdoor yourself? If you're still with me, drop a comment. I wouldn't sleep after finding that. And subscribe if you haven't yet. 2 nights after the chilling discovery beneath the trapdoor, the silence of Willow Pines was once again broken. A trail camera, strategically placed by investigators among whispering Oregon pines, caught grainy footage of a figure slipping quietly back towards the cabin, movements deliberate and controlled. The man wore a heavy coat, collar raised against the biting chill, but his face was unmistakable in the moonlight: Jeremy Madsen. Ethan's co-worker, closest friend, and ironically, the best man at the wedding that now haunted the lives of everyone it touched. The FBI moved swiftly, arresting Jeremy as dawn cracked the horizon, flooding his motel room with harsh fluorescent light. He offered no resistance, his expression a curious blend of resignation and relief, as if the burden he'd carried had finally become unbearable. At the station, interrogation lights hummed quietly overhead as Agent Tanner pressed gently yet insistently, peeling back layers of carefully constructed deception. Slowly, Jeremy began to speak. "I helped Ethan set things up," he confessed quietly, eyes fixated on his hands. "At first, I thought he was just planning a romantic surprise, a retreat. A reset, he called it. Said Hannah needed to be free from distractions, from the past. Pure. Untouched by anything outside their bond." Jeremy paused, the weight of his admission settling visibly across his shoulders. "I swear, I didn't hurt her. I was just following instructions." He continued haltingly, describing the tasks Ethan had assigned him. Wiring cameras. Reinforcing doors. Stalking the basement, quietly preparing a scenario Jeremy now claimed he hadn't fully understood at the time. His voice carried a chilling sincerity, a troubling earnestness, as if he were struggling to convince himself as much as the agents watching him closely from across the interrogation table. But then, Agent Tanner asked the question that silenced the room entirely: "Jeremy, if Ethan orchestrated this, why are you here now, alone? Where is Ethan?" Jeremy looked up slowly, his gaze shifting to something beyond the sterile room, something invisible yet heavy with significance. His voice came out hoarse, burdened by a truth he'd clearly rehearsed yet never fully accepted. "He failed," Jeremy said softly, an almost reverent tone. "So I stepped in." Those simple words rang heavily, hanging in silence as each investigator exchanged uneasy glances, each heartbeat echoing loudly in their chests. The implications were clear and terrifying. Jeremy had not merely assisted. He had assumed control. Under relentless questioning, Jeremy's carefully woven composure began to fray. He revealed Ethan's obsession with remaking Hannah into what Ethan called his perfect bride. Ethan's vision was extreme, meticulous, impossibly demanding, stripping Hannah down to her core, rebuilding her in the image of his twisted fantasy. But somewhere in the dark process, Ethan had failed to maintain his own grip on reality. He'd become erratic, volatile, dangerous even to himself. Jeremy had watched the spiral, silently waiting, uncertain how far Ethan would take things until that final night when the unthinkable happened. I came to check on him, Jeremy continued, voice barely above a whisper, gaze distant. He'd locked Hannah in the basement, shouting nonsense, saying she wasn't the same, that she wasn't responding to him like she should. He'd broken his own rules. Lost control. Jeremy paused, his jaw tightening, his next words heavy with implication. So. I intervened. I couldn't let it continue. Investigators leaned in closer, holding their breaths. Intervened how? Tanner asked sharply. Jeremy's eyes, filled with remorse yet tinged with a twisted sense of righteousness, lifted slowly to meet the agent's stare. I took care of Ethan. Made sure he wouldn't hurt her again. He wanted perfection. He wanted control. But he'd become the problem. In the silence that followed, the weight of Jeremy's confession settled like a heavy fog. Tanner's voice came out even, careful. And Hannah? Jeremy hesitated, emotion flickering behind the mask he'd worn for so long. I tried to protect her. But Ethan, he'd already damaged her. I moved her somewhere safe. She was, fragile, confused. Not ready to come out yet. He leaned forward, almost pleading. I swear, everything I did was to protect her. Ethan was my best friend, but he lost himself. He became someone else entirely. Someone dangerous. The room felt colder, smaller, as if the walls themselves had crept inward. Jeremy's version painted him as misguided, yet noble, an unlikely hero forced to commit unthinkable acts to save Hannah from Ethan's madness. But beneath his careful words lay a subtle darkness, a disturbing undercurrent, hinting at deeper motivations he wouldn't reveal. In another room, Mark watched silently through the mirrored glass, fists clenched so tightly his knuckles had whitened. Hannah wasn't safe. Jeremy's words were another manipulation, another layer of deceit. He'd seen the photos, the journals, Ethan's detailed plans. Ethan's madness was clear, but Jeremy's complicity, his cold precision, spoke of something equally sinister. Mark knew that behind Jeremy's mild facade lurked something just as chilling, just as ruthless. But he also knew something else: Hannah was still alive. Jeremy's obsession, masked as compassion, had kept her breathing, and for Mark, that meant hope. He turned away sharply, adrenaline surging. He would find her, wherever Jeremy had hidden her. She would not become another victim, another forgotten name. Mark swore this silently, the vow burning deep in his chest like a sacred flame. This wasn't just about survival. It was about reclaiming life from darkness, refusing to let evil win. It was about recognizing that courage didn't mean the absence of fear, but rather action in spite of it. Hannah had fought silently, alone in that darkness. Now it was Mark's turn to fight, not just for her, but for every victim silenced, every voice lost beneath a tide of hidden cruelty. As Jeremy's interrogation continued into the long, sleepless night, Mark stood ready, preparing to step beyond the shadows, driven by a conviction that had grown stronger with every revelation. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. Do you believe Jeremy's version of the story? Or is he the real monster here? Hit the bell icon. What Jeremy confesses next changes everything. It was Jeremy's phone, pinging its GPS signal like a slow, haunting heartbeat, that guided investigators along winding, forgotten roads toward an old, weathered farm. Fields stretched endlessly beneath an iron-gray sky, tall grasses swaying silently as if keeping dark secrets. A single farmhouse stood neglected at the center, paint peeling, roof sagging, a decayed monument to silence. But it was behind this farmhouse, concealed beneath the dusty boards of an old chicken coop, that the nightmare truly unraveled. A hidden trapdoor, heavy, iron-bolted, awaited discovery like an unspoken dare. The FBI agents exchanged uneasy glances, knowing whatever lay beneath wasn't meant to be found. They wrenched open the rusted hinges, darkness below swallowing the thin daylight instantly. What waited beneath was a sickening tableau, a space meticulously prepared, untouched by the passing of years. Shelves lining cold concrete walls, arranged neatly and deliberately, bore horrors frozen in time. Dozens of VHS tapes. 18 to be precise, each labeled in careful handwriting. Wife 01. Wife 02. Wife 03. And so on, each number marking a silent story never told, each tape a soul caught within an endless loop of horror. Beside these tapes, a leather-bound journal rested, thick with use, edges worn and pages yellowed with age. Investigators handled the journal carefully, opening its cover to find dates, locations, meticulous obedience milestones, scrawled obsessively, page after disturbing page filled with careful handwriting unmistakably belonging to Ethan himself. But the true horror was the Polaroid wall. Photographs pinned neatly, each woman staring blankly into the camera, expressions hollow, devoid of hope. Faces that once smiled at graduations, birthdays, weddings, now reduced to shadows staring back from the abyss. And among them, the very first photo, Sarah Whitmore, missing in Missouri, 2003. Wife 01. Ethan's first. 18 years of unspoken terror, 18 hidden lives. Ethan's twisted narrative slowly emerged from the pages of that journal. He had been building a twisted legacy for nearly 2 decades, unnoticed, unchecked, hidden behind a mask of normalcy. Each entry documented obsessive efforts to reshape these women into his distorted vision of perfection. Investigators recoiled inwardly at the depth of Ethan's cruelty. His notes spoke chillingly of breaking points, progress, and ultimate surrender. He saw these women not as people but as projects, mere clay to mold and discard if they shattered in his grip. In the sterile silence of the police evidence room, investigators carefully cued the first tape, labeled Wife 01. A grainy image flickered onto the screen, time-stamped March 2003. Sarah sat at a plain wooden table, eyes hollow, her voice trembling but determined. "My name is Sarah Whitmore. I'm still alive. If you see this, please come get me." The tape crackled briefly, cutting to a later moment, Sarah visibly thinner, eyes more vacant. Her voice now lifeless, repeating phrases Ethan had clearly coached her through. Obedience milestones achieved. The sickening realization settled heavily. Ethan had systematically erased and rebuilt identities until there was nothing left but obedience. Each tape revealed similar nightmares, each woman slowly losing herself, the tapes becoming progressively darker, more desperate. Until Wife 18, Hannah Grayson. The final woman, Ethan's crowning achievement, his perfect bride-to-be, or so he imagined. But Hannah was different. Something in her defiance lingered even at her weakest moments, her gaze burning into the camera, silently pleading for someone, anyone, to truly see her, to find her. It was Hannah's fierce silent plea that resonated powerfully, igniting a spark within the hearts of every agent watching. This wasn't just a case anymore. This was about reclaiming the humanity Ethan had so violently stolen. This was about justice not just for Hannah, but for all 18 women whose voices had been stolen in that basement of horrors. Meanwhile, Jeremy remained isolated, interrogated relentlessly. Confronted now with undeniable evidence, he broke further, finally admitting Ethan had taught him, mentored him, passed along this twisted legacy. Jeremy claimed he had tried to intervene, to stop Ethan from spiraling further. But was it truth or self-preservation? Investigators couldn't yet know. And in a quiet motel room miles away, Mark Talbot, Hannah's closest friend, learned of the discovery. He felt the news like a physical blow, grief and guilt swirling like a storm. But amid that storm was something stronger, something brighter: resolve. Mark would not let Hannah become another silent Polaroid on a forgotten wall. He would not let her story end in darkness. Mark had always admired Hannah's unshakable spirit, her quiet strength, her unwillingness to compromise her sense of self. It was her resilience he would now channel, determined to honor her by doing whatever it took to bring her home. Days turned into sleepless nights as investigators and Mark dug deeper. Jeremy's revelations led authorities to hidden offshore accounts, coded messages, and safe houses Ethan had established, each carefully constructed as a potential final hiding place. As agents tracked down these threads, Mark revisited every message, every memory, piecing together the clues Hannah had left behind, a trail of subtle defiance, small rebellions Ethan had underestimated. Then, on the fourth night, Mark found it, a single coded reference Hannah had scribbled in her diary, referencing a place Ethan mistakenly thought only he knew about. An abandoned farmhouse Ethan's grandmother had once owned. It matched the coordinates found scribbled in Ethan's journal entries alongside Hannah's name. In the quiet, sterile hush of the FBI briefing room, an analyst pored over Ethan's journals, carefully decoding each entry. Then, tucked at the very back of Ethan's final journal, he paused. His fingers traced a faintly penciled line, cryptic numbers intertwined with fragments of scripture. Agents quickly deciphered the passage. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Matthew 6 verse 21. Blue Rock, Oregon. Building 17. A flurry of activity erupted. Blue Rock, Oregon, a forgotten industrial ghost town, a relic of rust and shadows, abandoned factories whispering memories from a forgotten era. Building 17 was a warehouse untouched for years, sealed by neglect and obscurity. The FBI moved swiftly, teams mobilizing under the gray skies of early dawn. As agents approached the crumbling warehouse, the wind rattled rusted doors, a haunting moan greeting them. Bolt cutters snapped through locks untouched for years. Flashlights sliced the oppressive gloom, beams crisscrossing through abandoned machinery and silent corridors thick with dust and decay. Deep inside, at the farthest corner, an iron door, heavy, padlocked from the outside. The lead agent called out carefully, his voice gentle but firm. "Hannah. Hannah Grayson. FBI, we're here to help." Silence. Then, faintly, weakly, a voice cracked through the darkness. I'm here. Please, help me." They broke through swiftly, hinges screaming in protest. There, in a shadowed corner, they found her, Hannah, pale as moonlight, her once bright eyes sunken yet blazing fiercely in the dark. Shivering, dehydrated, chained to a bed, yet unbroken, her very existence a testament to resilience and quiet, enduring defiance. Her first words as they carefully wrapped a blanket around her trembling shoulders, giving her water with gentle urgency, came broken but clear. "He said he wanted to heal our marriage. That God brought us together, that I belonged to him. He'd quote scripture, twisting it. Watching my every move, counting my breaths, my footsteps." Her voice broke, but determination flared, lighting her exhausted features. "When I resisted, he made me watch tapes. Other women, he tried to make perfect." Her voice shook with anger now. "But I refused to become another tape." The lead agent carefully asked her the question everyone dreaded. "Hannah, where is Ethan?" Her eyes flashed briefly with confusion, then darkened into certainty. One night, Ethan and Jeremy, they fought. It was terrible. Screaming, glass breaking, blood. Ethan never came back. But, I never saw his body. A chill settled into the silence. The uncertainty hung thick. Had Ethan met his end, or had he vanished once again, another carefully orchestrated escape? Back in civilization, the news of Hannah's rescue rippled outward. Mark Talbot heard the news on the radio, gripping his steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. Relief surged through him, then unease. Ethan was still missing. Justice was incomplete. Hannah's nightmare, Mark realized bitterly, wasn't over yet. Days passed as Hannah recovered, guarded carefully at a quiet hospital, nurses and agents alike moved by her courage. Word spread about her resilience, how, even in captivity, she never let Ethan claim victory. Hannah, once quiet and reserved, became an unlikely symbol, proof of hope amid darkness. As she regained strength, Hannah opened up to Mark, her voice steady, her gaze determined. I survived because I refused to believe his lies. Ethan wanted to break me, to rewrite who I was. But I held on, because he never understood my true strength. My faith. He twisted scripture, but I knew the truth. That kept me alive. Mark felt his heart swell with admiration and a fierce determination of his own. Hannah's survival wasn't luck, it was sheer, unyielding bravery. Meanwhile, investigators scoured the warehouse and Ethan's hideouts, uncovering chilling layers of Ethan's obsession, journals, coded letters, and meticulous notes detailing Hannah's every action. But no Ethan. No remains. Only bloody footprints trailing off into the shadows, ending abruptly at an abandoned railroad track. Had Ethan escaped once again, receding like a ghost into the background, or had someone else stepped in, silencing him forever? The FBI couldn't afford guesses. They expanded their search, desperate for closure. Hannah, meanwhile, spoke publicly for the first time, addressing the cameras with remarkable clarity and poise. I am alive because of every woman before me. Sarah Whitmore. And every other wife Ethan tried to erase. They deserved better. They deserved justice. I won't rest until their stories are told, until everyone sees that monsters hide behind smiles and scripture and kindness, but they never win. Her statement echoed across the nation. Hannah's courage ignited movements, survivors stepped forward with their own stories, inspired by the woman who refused to stay silent. In quiet moments, Hannah confided in Mark, strength and vulnerability intertwined in her voice. Mark, I don't know if Ethan's gone or hiding. But wherever he is, he doesn't control me anymore. He never understood true faith, never grasped real strength. Mark reached gently for her hand, nodding solemnly. You taught him, and the world, that monsters can't silence truth. Ethan thought he could break you, but all he did was forge your voice into something stronger. Weeks passed, investigations deepened, and still Ethan remained elusive. But Hannah grew stronger, her voice becoming a beacon for survivors everywhere. She dedicated herself to advocacy, reclaiming not just her voice but those stolen from the 18 women Ethan had hurt before her. In televised interviews, podcasts, and survivor rallies, Hannah always returned to one core truth. Our lives are not defined by those who harm us, but by how we rise afterward. Ethan tried to rewrite my story, but he failed. Now, I get to write my own ending. Yet, even as Hannah became a public figure of resilience, questions lingered, unanswered whispers threading through every conversation. Had Ethan truly met his end? Or had he cleverly orchestrated yet another disappearance, watching quietly from the shadows, waiting patiently for the world's attention to fade? The question haunted investigators, weighed on Hannah's heart, and gripped Mark's soul. But through the uncertainty, Hannah stood unwavering, determined, and free. She wasn't Ethan's victim, not anymore. She was a survivor, an advocate, and a voice of relentless hope. As the story reached its peak, leaving the nation captivated, one question echoed louder, a quiet prayer rising in every viewer's heart. Justice for Hannah. Is Ethan dead, or did he fake his own death to vanish again? Type, "Justice for Hannah," if you're praying she gets peace, and don't forget to subscribe. Ethan's obsession started years ago. It began not with Hannah. Not with Sarah Whitmore. But much earlier. Quietly, obsessively, etched into the corners of Ethan Caldwell's mind long before the world would ever hear his name. 1 month after Hannah's rescue, a warrant approved by federal court opened a long-forgotten safety deposit box under Ethan's name at a rural bank in Utah. Small-town clerks had filed the box away with dozens of others, unaware of the horrors it contained. Until now. Inside, agents found carefully arranged contents, nothing accidental, nothing rushed. Each item was placed with intent, like a shrine to madness. At the top, a stack of letters, yellowing at the edges but preserved in airtight plastic sleeves. The earliest dated March 2002. Addressed to one woman. Sarah Whitmore. Long before she became Wife 01. Before anyone had vanished. Before Ethan's name had ever graced a police file. The letters were obsessive, poetic in a way that left a bitter aftertaste. Ethan called Sarah a chosen soul, a vessel, a mirror for obedience. He quoted scripture alongside song lyrics, binding religion and romance into something grotesque. But they weren't love letters. They were instructions. Promises. Warnings. If the world won't see your grace, I will mold it. If they won't honor you, I will teach you how. The altar awaits. Next to the letters, newspaper clippings. Dozens of them. Some torn cleanly, others frayed from wear. All about women. Missing brides. Runaway fiancés. Honeymoon disappearances. Across 2 decades, across 9 states. Faces smiling under headlines like, "Still Missing, Last Seen Wearing Her Gown, Newlywed Vanishes on Day 2. And in the margins of each clipping, Ethan's notes scrawled in pencil, "Almost perfect, wrong timing, not ready." It was chillingly clear. These weren't coincidences. These were tests. Sarah was simply the first one who fit. But the final discovery silenced even the most seasoned agents. A leather-bound blueprint, labeled in gold foil. The doctrine of devotion. A manifesto. A roadmap. A sickness, codified. Inside, pages and pages of diagrams, floor plans of cabins, bunkers, false trapdoors. Flowcharts tracking emotional deconstruction. Schedules for trust-building rituals. Milestones labeled silence, purity, reconstruction. Ethan had written it all out like scripture. The way others pen business plans, sermons, novels. His goal was never love. Never even lust. It was control. Every marriage, every vow, every smiling honeymoon photo was a script Ethan had written in advance. The women were never wives. They were roles. Puppets in a grand, delusional production Ethan believed he'd been divinely called to direct. He wasn't a man who lost control. He built it. From the ground up. Back in the FBI office, Special Agent Rosalind Kay turned the final page of the Doctrine of Devotion and whispered. He wasn't inspired. He wasn't twisted by trauma. He built this alone. He made himself a monster. The revelation sent tremors through every victim's family, through the entire task force. The truth was far worse than they'd feared. Ethan didn't snap. He studied. Planned. Practiced. The warehouse. The VHS tapes. The cabin. The trapdoors. All of it originated in this blueprint, a doctrine of obedience, wrapped in the mask of devotion. Meanwhile, Hannah, now in recovery but fiercely focused, read through redacted versions of the blueprint provided by authorities. In her quiet room, she traced the ink with steady fingers. So it wasn't about me, she said aloud, voice neither angry nor afraid. It never was. He thought he could write a life around me. And I ripped up the script. In a televised panel days later, she spoke for the first time about Ethan not as her abuser, but as an architect of his own downfall. You can't save people like that, she said, her voice clear. You can only stop them. And if they disappear, you remember every name, every tape, every bride. Across the country, memorials were erected in the names of the 18 women. Sarah's family attended the unveiling of a garden in Missouri. Hannah sent a letter to be read aloud. He thought we were his work. But our stories don't end with him. They end with truth. With memory. And with each of us reclaiming the power he tried to take. Somewhere, maybe buried in a new identity, maybe hidden in the hills, Ethan Caldwell still lingered. Or perhaps his final chapter had already closed, lost beneath blood and betrayal in that warehouse fight with Jeremy. But it no longer mattered. Because his doctrine was exposed. And the women he once silenced now spoke louder than he ever could. Do you think monsters are born, or created? Let's debate in the comments. Subscribe if you want the truth behind the next trapdoor Ethan may have built. The case files were closed. Ethan's story faded slowly from the headlines, becoming just another dark chapter in the archives of true crime. But evil, true evil, never really sleeps, it only waits. Quietly. Patiently. It was a Tuesday night, ordinary and quiet. A young bride-to-be named Lisa, eager and glowing, posted excitedly in a wedding planning subreddit. Just got our engagement photos done. Met a sweet older photographer who offered us a free session. Here's a preview. She uploaded one photograph, beautiful, romantic, sunlight catching her hair and her fiancé's proud smile. Within minutes, hundreds of comments flooded in. Beautiful. Congratulations. Goals. But buried among the cheerful comments was a quiet, urgent question from a user named Truthseeker777. Who's the guy in the reflection behind you? Other users zoomed in, analyzed, debated. Within hours, the thread shifted from congratulations to concern, then panic. Because reflected in the glass behind the smiling couple, barely visible but unmistakable, stood Ethan Grayson. His face unchanged, eyes piercing, mouth twisted into a familiar, haunting grin. Lisa never replied. Her account vanished that same night. Every digital footprint scrubbed clean as if she'd never existed. Authorities found nothing, no trace, no body, no clue. Just like before. Fear ignited anew. Forums lit up with theories, warnings, sightings. Everyone asked the same terrifying question, was Ethan really gone, or had he simply learned to hide even better? This was never just about Hannah, Jeremy, or Evelyn. It wasn't simply a missing couple. It was a system, ritualistic, carefully planned, rooted deeply in one man's terrifying belief. Ethan Grayson didn't vanish. He evolved. And now he waits, quietly, patiently, ready for his next moment. But this isn't just Hannah's story anymore. It's yours too. Because if it had been your sister, your best friend, your loved one, or even you, what would you have done differently? Would you have fought like Evelyn? Persisted like Mark? Survived like Hannah? Or would Ethan have erased your voice, like the others? Because maybe, just maybe, his next victim is already out there. Maybe she's posting her wedding pictures, smiling blissfully unaware. Maybe she's watching this video right now. What would you have done? Comment your theory. Do you think he's still out there? And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on your notification bell because the next case we cover may already be happening in your city.